Now, in this Reserve Bank of India case, the arguments were very, very interesting. The arguments were that the Reserve Bank of India is a statutory authority constituted under the Reserve Bank of India Act of 1938, and the purpose was to regulate and control money supply in the country. The Reserve Bank of India also acts as a statutory banker to the Government of India and to the state governments and manages their public debt. In addition, it regulates and supervises commercial bank and cooperative bank in the country. The Reserve Bank of India exercises control over the volume of credit, the rate of interest chargeable on the loans and advances and deposits in order to ensure economic stability. So it is in the economic interest of the state that the Reserve Bank of India functions in a transparent and accountable manner. The Reserve Bank of India is also vested with the power to determine banking policy in the interest of the banking system, monetary stability and the sound economic growth. The Reserve Bank of India is also exercising powers conferred under it under Section 35 of the Banking Regulation Act and the Banking Regulation Act of 1949 and conducts inspection of banks in the country. Now, in its capacity as the regulator and supervisor of the banking system of the country, there is access to various information that the Reserve Bank has. And the inspecting team and the officers carry out inspection of different banks, and much of the information that is accessed by the inspecting officers of the RBI are actually confidential. And interestingly, the RBI referred to Section 28 of the Banking Regulation Act to actually state that it is such a confidential information. Now, these were some of the arguments that were made by the Reserve Bank of India so that said information can be denied. Now, on the other hand, you will notice that when you look at a lot of banks that are unfortunately, entering into issues like non-performing assets, a lot of banks are unfortunately getting into liquidation. There is an issue of merger. There is a lot of public money and public interest involved in the functioning of the banks. And if we look at the preamble of the RTA Act, there is definitely the aspect about what information is necessary in public interest and what is the reason for ensuring transparency and confidentiality. And I think there must be a harmonizing of conflicting interest. The harmonization of conflicting interest is between what information requires confidentiality and what information should be provided under the Right to Information Act. I think that kind of harmonization is something that is very, very important as we go forward in the implementation of the Right to Information Act. Now, what the court noted in this case is that they looked at the Constitution of India, they looked at Section 8, they looked at the Official Secret Act, they looked at the scope of the relationship of fiduciary, because I think that is what the banks and the banking institutions often rely on. They looked at the term fiduciary in some of these following manners. They said that the scope of fiduciary relationship consists of the following rules. First, no conflict rule. A fiduciary must not place himself in a position where his own interest conflicts with that of his customer or the beneficiary. There must be a real sense of possibility of conflict. Second, fiduciary relationship consists in the no profit rule. A fiduciary must not profit from his position at the expense of his customer, the beneficiary. Third rule is the undivided loyalty rule. A fiduciary owes undivided loyalty to the beneficiary, not to place himself in a position where his duty towards one person conflicts with the duty that he owes to another customer. The fourth rule of fiduciary is the duty of confidentiality. This is where the RBI says that in the fiduciary capacity, the duty of confidentiality benefits not only to the other person but benefits the advantage of the RBI as well. Also, the RBI is supposed to uphold public interest and not the individual interest of the bank. And hence, you will notice that being a statutory body, being an organization of the government, being a body that is holding the trust of the people and the government together, I think there is a larger public interest in terms of the depositors, the citizens, and the country's economic system, that the Reserve Bank of India acts in a very transparent manner and does not hide information, especially just because those information may embarrass individual banks. Because I think while banks have their right of commercial confidence, I think the public's interest to know how these banks are functioning is a larger public interest, and the Reserve Bank of India ought to weigh in the larger public interest in disclosing the said information. The court came down pretty heavily on the Reserve Bank of India. They said that the Reserve Bank of India is making baseless and unsubstantiated argument that the disclosure of the inspection report would injure or hurt the economic interest of the state. They said this is totally misconceived. They said that the public have the right to know. It is just about an inspection report about the functioning of the bank, whether the bank is functioning in an adequate manner or in a manner that is prejudicial to the interest of its depositors. And hence, the Supreme Court said that it is the duty of the Reserve Bank of India to disclose the inspection report. And while they can probably appreciate the information as applicable in terms of Section 10, they can apply severability in case that is required. However, I think the economic interest of the state and the national objective is in bringing about transparency. And I think the Reserve Bank of India should be like a spectacle. It must try and disclose as much information as possible so that there is a clear transparency in the functioning of the banks. And that would mean that the government is efficiently regulating the institution of the banks. And this would bring about a different kind of a legal system, and hence it was necessary for the Reserve Bank of India to be as transparent as possible and not hide the said information. So I think this is what the Supreme Court said, and I think they did lay down the emphasis that it is important that the RBI circular which promotes non-disclosure must be read down, and it was the duty of the Reserve Bank of India to actually promote transparency and accountability in all its functioning. And there is a larger public interest that is served, and hence the inspection reports should be made available. So these were some of the observations of the Supreme Court in this case, and hence the plea of economic interest was not accepted by the Supreme Court, and they actually weighed in terms of disclosure of such report.